I have been on a speaking tour all over the country for this new book. And I mean this sincerely. This event is probably the one I have most been looking forward to. Partly because what I'm going to talk about, you all are uniquely able to understand, because I'm going to tell some of my own war stories, which are from having worked on an entrepreneurship program at the State Department, which I tell when people ask me what's it like working on entrepreneurship at the State Department, I say it's very easy. The State Department is the Antichrist of entrepreneurship. So you guys all get that. But truly, I've been working in this space for about 7 or 8 years, and this organization and what you guys are doing, and what Jim and Ben and everyone who's worked so hard to put this together, to me, this is one of the most innovative and entrepreneurial efforts in the space that I've spent my whole life in, which is entrepreneurship. So I'm really happy to be here. I'm going to be here much of the day today, and all the things that Jim said resonate with me, including wanting to meet as many of you as I possibly can. So what I'm going to do is talk about this new book. Do we have the first slide? Yeah. So I've written this book. This is my first and, by the way, last book. So many of you are career military people. I'm a career business person. I spent 30 plus years in the private sector, and a lot of people say I have a rich and diverse past. I call it a very checkered past because I've had a lot of different jobs. But I basically have worked. I started life on Wall Street in international project finance. Then spent some time in consulting at McKinsey. Most of my career has been in the media and entertainment industry. I'm from Los Angeles. I spent a decade at Warner Brothers, where I was head of strategy and corporate development, and eventually head of the operating committee of Warner Brothers. And I've had several entrepreneurial ventures, almost all of which have been abject failures. One was extremely successful, and as we all know, that's all it takes. I co-founded in the mid-'80s a satellite telecommunications company based in the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg, which was the only country that would give us an orbit slot. Turns out having an orbit slot is the key factor for success in having a satellite company. Otherwise, it's in your backyard and is extremely ineffective. So this company, which is today called SCS, Société Européenne des Satellites, is the largest commercial television satellite system in the world. It distributes through 52 satellites, 6,200 channels of audio, video, and data. It broadcasts all of the commercial cable channels outside of North America, everything from Al Jazeera to Sky Television to MTV to CNN. And it is now a very large and successful company. After a whole bunch of different parts of my career, including several startups that were unsuccessful, which of course we all know you learn the most from, I retired and I moved to Maine. I moved from Beverly Hills, California to Lincolnville, Maine, which has 1,800 people, and is as far from Beverly Hills as you can go and stay in the United States and not get wet. So I was interested in a very different kind of life. And one of the things that has always motivated me and what has brought me to write this book, which I just want to talk about as I begin this, is that I have a background in history. I was a history major at Tufts, and then I went to the Fletcher School and have a degree in international economics. And but I was born in Budapest. I was born in Budapest in 1954, the child of Holocaust survivors. Both of my parents, as children, were in camps. And we came to the U.S. in 1956 as refugees, which are much in the news these days. So we were one of those terrible people who come to the U.S., which, by the way, everyone in this room is probably one of at some point. But in my case, I grew up with a sense of how important international politics are, and how immediately they can affect your life every day on the street in Los Angeles. It was a sense that many Americans, who are 2, 3, 4 generations, don't necessarily have. So I was very much aware always of what happens when things go terribly wrong. And for me, things going terribly wrong means the breakdown of states. It means the radicalization of organizations that have the means to inflict enormous damage and loss of life. And so I've always spent a lot of time looking at what it is that really drives that breakdown. And for me, the answer was economics. And within economics, it was joblessness. And I spent a lot of my life sort of looking at the direct connection between jobs and political stability and peace. So what is the best way to create jobs? It's entrepreneurship, right? We'll talk about that. But in my book, I have quite a lot of evidence around the role of entrepreneurship in creating employment, particularly non-government employment. So there are a lot of places where, Greece is one example, where 50% of the population is employed by the government, and we see what effect that has on the economy. So my whole interest in the entrepreneurship space started with this recognition that there is a straight line connection between entrepreneurship, jobs, and political stability. So we're going to talk a lot about that, but let me just start by giving you, this is the outline of today's presentation, which is roughly also the outline of the book. So let me start with my definition of an entrepreneur, which again is wonderful because it plays so much into what Jim was talking about at the top of the meeting. To me, an entrepreneur is a person with the vision to see a new product or process and the ability to make it happen. That's my definition. Now, this is an important definition, and I just want to unpack it a little bit because it has some nuances in it. First of all, it's about product or process. So in developing countries, which is where the biggest instability comes from, and probably where many of you have served, very often, entrepreneurship is not what it is about in the United States, which is, we always think of, Silicon Valley, high tech, biotech, intellectual property creation. Very often it is about what I call no tech or low tech, not high tech. And it is often about process change, not product innovation. So, for example, Starbucks didn't invent coffee. They invented a new way of selling coffee. Quinoa, which I talk about in my book, was a $35 million business in Peru selling a grain that the Incas ate 2,000 years ago or more. Today it's a $3.5 billion business, same quinoa. Change the process. So the innovation of process is as important as the innovation in product. And that's particularly true in developing countries. Second part of the nuance in this definition is the ability to make it happen. And this is one of my favorite things because, I got into this business having joined the government for the first time in 2009. I was retired, I was living in Maine, and I'd always been interested in this relationship between entrepreneurship and foreign policy. And lo and behold, the President of the United States, the new president, gives his first foreign policy speech at the University of Cairo. And he talks about how the United States needs to change the way it interacts with the Muslim world. It can't only be about terrorism 24/7. There has to be more to it. And one of the things he identifies is addressing joblessness by using entrepreneurship, which had kind of been my mantra for a long time. In fact, it had been my mantra in the mid-'80s when I was a fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations and shared an office with another fellow named Condoleezza Rice, and she, when she became Secretary of State, started a program called the Franklin Fellowships, which, like many things at the State Department, is a really great idea, miserably executed. And the idea was bring people from America into the State Department, so the State Department is reconnected to the United States, which was a really great idea. So the criteria were 20 years or more of non-government experience, and you could apply to be a Franklin Fellow. And you could be anything. You could be a ballet dancer, you could be a football player, you could be a business guy, you could be a surgeon, anything as long as you hadn't worked in the government. Really good idea. I was one of the first people to get one of these. By the way, for the privilege of working there, you get to work for free. So I got one of these, and when I heard, and it was good for 5 years. I didn't take it up in the Bush Condoleezza Rice administration, but I did take it up in the Obama Hillary Clinton administration. I did go to the State Department, and I became the first senior advisor for entrepreneurship at the State Department, which is a job that still exists. And I started a program called the Global Entrepreneurship Program, and it was based on the premise that it was about jobs, and that you could actually change the dynamic around jobs. And I worked in 8 Muslim-majority countries, 3 where we established large programs, Egypt, Indonesia, and Turkey in that order, and 5 where we had secondary programs, Lebanon, Jordan, Algeria, Tunisia, Morocco. And so the book comes out of that experience and also some other work. But the reason I mention it in connection with the definition is that I learned something that you all also know, which is why, again, I love this audience, is that it's what we say in the startup world, 5% inspiration, 95% perspiration. The same is true in public policy or in foreign affairs. Coming up with the policy is 5%. Executing the policy is 95%. So what I realized was that President Obama, Secretary Clinton, both of the Deputy Secretaries of State, the Undersecretary for Economics, the Assistant Secretary for Economics, where I was, in whose shop I was, and a million other people across the government all agreed about the importance of entrepreneurship, especially in fragile and failed states like Iraq and Afghanistan and Libya and Syria and several other places, Somalia. But implementing that is where the rubber meets the road. So for me, the ability to make it happen is as important as any other part of this definition. Now in the United States, entrepreneurs are rock stars. They are today's fighter pilots. They are the sexiest, most glamorous thing you can be. In fact, a lot of people, I think ill-advisedly so, even pay some of America's best and brightest students to drop out of grad school to start a business. So it's a very cool thing to do. In my world, in developing countries, it's exactly the opposite. Entrepreneurs are the crabgrass that grows up in the broken concrete through the garbage and the broken glass and beer bottles and used syringes and all of the detritus of society. They're the ones who, despite all of the awful things that happen, somehow manage to start a business. And they are what we call necessity-driven entrepreneurs. They are anything but cool kids. And in fact, I've worked in 36 countries now over the last 8 years doing entrepreneurship development, and I can safely say that while there are very few universal truths, this is one of them. Every single one of those countries has a chip on its shoulder when it comes to a culture for entrepreneurship. In other words, there is no culture for entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurs are viewed negatively. And if you are bright, successful, come from a good family, went to a good school, the worst thing you can tell your parents is, by the way, I'm going to start a company. What they want to hear is you're going to go work for the foreign ministry. You're going to go work for a major bank. you're going to go work for McKinsey. They do not want to hear that you have this incredibly harebrained idea to start a new business, and by the way, please lend me all the money I need to do it. That's the last thing they want to hear. So entrepreneurs are a very different kind of person in the developing world, as all of you will know. So why is entrepreneurship important to American foreign policy? Well, the book has a chapter which is called "A Million Reasons Entrepreneurship is Good for You." So don't worry, I'm not going to do a million reasons. However, there are what I call sort of a baker's dozen, 13, that I talk about in considerable detail in the book, and I'm going to just touch on a few of them quickly as I run through this. So the first one, obviously, is what I started at the top of the conversation with, is jobs. Now, it's interesting, when you get into the research around the correlation between unemployment and war, you will find, and I'm talking historically now, historically over hundreds of years, not the last 20 or 50 or 100 years, but over hundreds of years, the single strongest correlate to violent conflict is joblessness. And if you look at what has happened even in just in the relatively short time of American history and American foreign military involvement, the root cause has been joblessness, which, by the way, is true regardless of the culture of the country. So the Bolshevik Revolution, right, was substantially caused by massive unemployment and unrest. In Nazi Germany, in 1932, the unemployment rate was 27%. So it's a very interesting thing. And what joblessness does, of course, is, in my opinion, it creates unrest and extremism, which, in the worst examples, is translated into the kind of terrorism and the violence that we see in the world today. Now, that is not to say that all terrorists are jobless, and everyone always says to me, well, Osama bin Laden came from a really wealthy family. And it's true, he did. But not the thousands of people who were recruited. So you really have to look at what is driving the what we would call today the viral spread of extremism, and you will find that it is often joblessness. Now, joblessness in the United States, when we talk about jobs, which is almost always the single most important political issue in the country, we go berserk when we have an 8.2% unemployment rate, right? That was the worst thing that had happened in many of our lives, those of us especially who are under maybe 45. Unimaginable. At the end of the Bush administration, beginning of the Obama administration, that was the unemployment rate. Today it's around 5.5%. So all the people who talk about how awful things are in America have forgotten how awful things were in America 8 years ago. But that is nothing. 8.2% is nothing compared to the jobless rate in the places where you have served and where the greatest threats to American security come from. There, the jobless rate is 20, 30, 40%. And in the Arab world, as an overall region, it is the highest rate in the world, and it is particularly relevant that the Arab world is one of the youngest regions in the world. 2 out of 3 Arabs are under 30. So you have extraordinary jobless rates. I do want to point out, by the way, that in Yemen and Egypt, not the Palestinian territory, but in Yemen and Egypt, the jobless rate refers to men because they don't count women. So in much of the data, even the places where they're able to collect data, which is Iraq and Afghanistan and Pakistan and Syria and Libya are examples of places where you cannot collect data. But even the places where you can, the data is incomplete because it only counts men. I include Molenbeek up here because Molenbeek, of course, is a suburb of Brussels where the terrorists who attacked the Brussels airport came from. And I just want to point out that, you know, we tend to have, and a lot of the political conversation in this country today is very much colored by the combination of Muslim and jobless. And I just want to point out that there are plenty of examples, the Bolshevik Revolution and Nazi Germany being two of them, where they were not Muslim and jobless and still ended badly. So, you know, the situation, and pick the country, whether it's, you know, Colombia and the FARC, much in the news today, whether it is Peru and Shining Path, whether it was the Khmer Rouge, whether it was Vietnam, whether it was China at the time of the Chinese Revolution. The correlation between joblessness and violence exists in all cultures. So what this means is that people become despondent. And, you know, one of the people that I have worked with most closely is an Egyptian American named Ahmed Al-Alfi, who probably has done more single-handedly to deal with the unemployment issue in Egypt than any other person, Egyptian or American, and worked with me in Egypt, which was the first and largest program I ran, was the Global Entrepreneurship Program in Egypt, where together with Alfie, we built the first incubator, which still exists. It's called Flat 6 Labs. It's in downtown Cairo in what was the old Greek campus of American University. And he has, you know, he's a business guy, he's an entrepreneur, and he puts it really simply. People have to have something to live for rather than something to die for. A 22-year-old young Egyptian probably has no hope ever of finding a job in his lifetime. That is what it's like today. So when you want to get married, when you want to have a family, when you want to have a home, you have to grok the fact that you have zero chance of getting a job, a traditional job, becoming an employee somewhere. So that drives a certain kind of behavior. Fernando de Soto, who I think is one of the most innovative, progressive thinkers in international economics, talks about the same fact, that we have to recognize that the root cause of violent extremism is not religious differences, it is not territorial claims, it is not centuries-old historic rivalries, it is joblessness. That is what moves millions of people to violence. So, number one reason why, of the million reasons entrepreneurship is good for you, is about jobs. But there are several others. And as I worked more and more in this space, I came up with really interesting examples of what some of those are. The first is, I worked for Hillary Clinton, and of course, I ended up, and by the way, I was not a political appointee. I didn't know her before. I came in under this Franklin Fellows program, and so I had no prior connection. I was not a particularly political person. But when you worked for her, you learned a lot about women and girls in the economy. That was just sort of part of the boot camp. So one of the things I realized was that, you know, of the million reasons entrepreneurship is good for you, it is one of the few things that is available to those not born to privilege as a way to get a leg up. And in most of the countries I was working in, that included all women and girls, and pretty much every guy who wasn't born to privilege, which was 99% of the guys. So this notion of entrepreneurship as sort of a way up was a very important one, and a very important reason for us to be involved. The other thing, again, that you as a group will uniquely understand, this is one of my favorite reasons, is that entrepreneurs are the same person everywhere in the world. So whether they are in Kansas City, or Kabul, or Kankakee, or in Barbados, or in Ghana, they are the same person. They are a bridge class of society. And one of the most fascinating things to me in my work was that I am a nice Jewish boy from Los Angeles. When I was doing all of this work in the Muslim world, I was not secret about that. I didn't broadcast it, but when people asked me, I told them. Without exception, in every Arab country I was at, including in the West Bank and Gaza, the first thing that people would ask me, young Arab entrepreneurs, and I had 2,000 of them in my Facebook group just in Egypt, was, could you invite us to an event in Washington where we could meet Israeli entrepreneurs and VCs, because we can see them but we can't talk to them, and that's what we want to really actually talk about? They weren't interested in American foreign policy vis-a-vis the Middle East. They weren't interested in Israeli or Palestinian politics. They were interested, as all entrepreneurs are, in perfecting their product, finding an investor, building a marketing plan, finding a potential acquirer, finding a strategic partner. They didn't want to talk about whether you were Sunni or Shia, or a Republican or a Democrat. They wanted to talk about building their businesses. And I know that for all of you who have served abroad, you know what I'm talking about when you talk to the local population. That is what people are interested in. So it's a wonderful bridge class of people. It also happens to be one of the most important drivers of economic success. So Jamaica and Singapore in 1965 were almost exactly the same country. They were the same size, they were islands, they were former British colonies, they had the same population, and they had exactly the same per capita income. Today, not so much. Today, after 50 years of stable government, some would say too stable in Singapore, but the fact is that after a steady government-driven program where entrepreneurship and economic development was at the core of the program in a multinational state that had never existed before, they have achieved one of the highest standards of living in the world. This also works in places that started off even worse. Rwanda, after the genocide, was arguably the biggest basket case that the world has known in hundreds of years. 21 years ago, at the end of the genocide, the average age in Rwanda was 12. 80% of the men between 18 and 40 were dead. 75% of the women were HIV infected. And there were 2 medical doctors in the country 21 years ago. Kagame, again, we can talk about the problems with the Kagame regime today, but the fact of the matter is that Kagame put entrepreneurship and business development at the center of his policies. And after 21 years, Rwanda has had the greatest increase in per capita income. It's a 4-fold increase of any country in sub-Saharan Africa. It has had the greatest improvement in its World Bank doing business ranking of any country since the World Bank started keeping rankings, including developed countries. And my favorite is Kigali, the citywide Wi-Fi in the new W Hotel just opened. So you know they've arrived. So what is another one of the reasons why entrepreneurship is good for you, especially if you're an American? Well, it's because it's about as American as all of those things. It is baked into our DNA. It is who we are. It is probably the thing that is most admired about America. And for all of us who spend time abroad and talk to people abroad, it doesn't take very long for you to realize that even among those who hate us the most, and in my travels I meet a lot of those, they still want to know what the secret sauce is to the American entrepreneurial miracle. They still want to know, by the way, we really can't stand you, we hate you, you're an imperialist, you're disgusting, but how do you do it? So there is this calling card that we have as a country that that is extremely powerful. So of course, because we have a very sophisticated government, we recognize this and we are using it to our benefit. No, not so much. Less than 1% of 1% of all American foreign assistance goes for entrepreneurship development. it makes America sort of very much in the middle of the pack of countries who support entrepreneurship development. We spend about the same amount of money as Australia, which has 23 million people and is an island and is 15 hours from anywhere on Earth, and which has 1/25 of our gross national product. That's where we are as a country. We spend lots and lots of money on defense. In Iraq and Afghanistan and Pakistan, since the beginning of the wars, we have spent, depends on which measure you use, but in the book I talk about $4 trillion. There have been 60,000 military casualties, American and Allied. There have been over 250,000 civilian casualties. There have been upwards of 7 million refugees, of which 1.5 million are in or trying to get to Europe. So they're either already there or they're on the periphery, destabilizing the European Union probably more than anything that's happened since the European Union was created. And the youth unemployment rate, to the extent that we can ascertain it, because, this is a big caveat, but because there's no unitary government in any of these countries that has control over the entire national territory, and therefore it's hard to get a reliable number. But the best numbers we have are that the youth unemployment rate in these 3 countries is somewhere between 1.25 and 1.5 times greater than it was before we started this. So if you believe, as I do, that there's a correlation between violence and unemployment, then the prognosis for Iraq and Afghanistan and Pakistan and Syria and Libya and Somalia and Mali and Chad are very poor. So we don't spend very much money, and we certainly don't spend it very smartly. Entrepreneurship programs like the one that I ran at the State Department are spread across 12 departments, 26 agencies, and 60 offices. And one of the reasons I was particularly excited about this event, and one of the reasons why I'm especially excited to be building a relationship with DEF, is that the single biggest agency that could do something about this, obviously, is DoD, and isn't. It isn't part of our defense spending. It isn't part of our strategy. And I believe it should be. The agency that does the most, of course, is USAID, which all of us who have worked with USAID know it is in varying degrees or definitions of broken. For some people, it is broken to the point that it is no longer functional. For other people, it's just really badly broken. But nobody thinks it's working great. One of the things is about USAID is that 3 companies get 1/3 of the money. 20 companies get 75% of the money. And to go with my good ideas, badly executed theory of a lot of things in government that I observe, it's like turning a screw with a rubber screwdriver. Even if you understand how important entrepreneurship promotion is, and even if you then try to fund some of the programs, just try to land one of these contracts if you are not one of the major players, who, by the way, by definition, are not entrepreneurial, right? They're these huge traditional US government contractors. And it's particularly true if you happen to be a small company. If you're a small, entrepreneurial, innovative company, then you have what I call the mouse dancing with the hippo problem. Because there is no way to connect the dots. You can't even apply for, much less succeed in obtaining, much less then handle the reporting and fulfillment obligations of a contract, which is why I, in the consulting business that I have, don't bid for USAID contracts. I work all over the world for many other different kinds of donors, investors, but not the US government. Because, and by the way, I was in the US government, and I am an evaluator for outside proposals for USAID funding, but I won't apply for any myself, because I know that it's impossible to ever get them. So, can we possibly do any better than this? Well, yeah. We can turn that one little piece of crabgrass that's growing up through the cracks in the concrete into a garden. In fact, of all of the things in international politics that are influenceable, I believe job creation through entrepreneurship is the single biggest one. It is very difficult for us to resolve centuries-old animosity between religious groups. Sunnis and Shias, Protestants and Catholics, Muslims and Jews. It is very difficult for us to resolve geographic problems that were created by history. For example, most of the Middle East and most of Africa, where territorial lines were drawn completely randomly by somebody in a room in Europe. But we can affect entrepreneurship. So the way that I do this, I've developed a particular approach, which I call the 6+6 model for entrepreneurship ecosystem development. I won't go into a lot of the details, but it basically says that there's no one single thing you can do. Like, you can't just start a new venture fund. You can't just start a new incubator. You have to do a combination of things. And they involve 6 categories of activity: identify, train, connect, and sustain, fund, enable public policy, and celebrate entrepreneurs. And 6 categories of players: corporations, foundations, universities, NGOs, investors, and government. And when we do the work that we do, we have a 3-step process: diagnostic, design, and implementation. In the diagnostic phase, we look at an economy. This happens to be Ghana, for work that we did for the UK government, where we mapped the Ghanaian entrepreneurial ecosystem, found the holes in it, and then came up with a plan to address those holes. So people ultimately ask the question, okay, this all makes sense, I get it, but why should the US government be doing this? Why should the US government be creating jobs in Ghana or Syria or Tunisia? And my answer is because joblessness is the root cause of violence, which is the biggest threat to the United States. And by the way, private industry is not exactly chomping at the bit to invest in failing or failed states, or the states which create the greatest threat to the US. So the first obligation of the American government is to provide for the common defense. And if that is true, it should be the American government that's boldly going where no other organization has gone. So I have, at the end of the book, a sort of prescription for solving the problem. It's really easy. We just have to fix 4 tiny things: funding, organization, procurement, and people. Funding, we need to spend more money, and hopefully that includes money from DoD. And that is part of the reason I was really excited to be here, because in all of my work, including at the State Department, it has been almost impossible to find a receptive ear within the Defense Department. So I'm hoping that maybe someone here knows someone. Number 2 is we have to fix the way we spend what money we do spend. If we keep throwing good money after bad, we're not going to get a different result. That includes coming up with new procurement and contracting mechanisms that relate to entrepreneurship and innovation. And I went through the Federal Acquisitions Regulations course, and I looked at the 52 volumes, 2,000 pages each, of which the Defense Department is the centerpiece, with 2 volumes, and which is another reason why small businesses don't apply for federal contracts. But the fact of the matter is that there are examples in the government, including even in the State Department, of programs that have been successful, that have changed procurement and contracting, at least for a specific area. One of the ones I study and talk about in the book is the Global Trafficking in Persons Program, GTIP, which has a different method for procurement and contracting because it falls under a different administrative rule, which is national emergency, that the executive branch is able to act without congressional pre-authorization. So that's what I think we need to do with entrepreneurship. And the last thing is very self-serving, which is it would be really great if either in the Defense Department or in the State Department or in USAID, the people who worked on entrepreneurship development actually had some experience as entrepreneurs. None of the people I ever met at any American embassy, in the Department of Commerce, at USAID, had ever met a payroll, had ever started a company, had ever figured out how to negotiate a photocopier lease, had ever learned how to, reserve a URL, had ever learned the difference between a B Corp, a C Corp, an LLC, or a sub S. And they had absolutely no practical experience. So while, because they were American, they were well received as being, oh, you must know how to do this. When you actually spoke to them and you found out that they were a career Foreign Service officer who'd spent 30 years in the Foreign Service and had never once in their life ever done a single thing that would be relevant to someone starting a business, then it ended up discrediting the effort. So I think we need people who know how to do that. So that's sort of my point of view. It's why I'm so excited to be here, and it's what the book is about. Thanks very much.